What is going on, guys? This is Michael Williams from Cartoon Universe, and today I'm going to do some secrets and analysis breakdown of Gem Harvest. I just finished watching the episode. It was a really cool episode. It wasn't what anyone was really expecting. We were kind of expecting something more, since it was a 30-minute special, something more relevant to the actual story or something lore related, but it was actually a really cool, cute, nice, heartwarming episode. We actually did get, it was still an important episode. We got some backstory on Greg and by extension Steven's human family, and we meet a new member of, actually this is the first member of Greg's family that we actually meet, so it was actually very interesting to see that and kind of get a little bit more backstory on Greg and what he left behind, because it's not something that we really had answers to before. We just kind of accepted that, Greg, oh yeah, he ran off and pursued a music career, but we didn't really know what the implications of that was for a long time. So we're just going to kind of break this down. Unfortunately, Haley is not here to join me. Sadly, she's off doing school things, I believe, or something. So rip Haley. I'm very sad she's not here, but she did give me some notes. I'm going to read her notes. I'm going to read my notes as well, kind of compile them together. But yeah, let's get started. So basically, the episode starts off with Lapis and Peridot growing vegetables because they want to grow soldiers, basically, because they miss homeworld and they don't realize that vegetables don't work like gems. And apparently, and we learn that Peridot actually has, as I mentioned before in my preview analysis, that Peridot does actually have the tools and knowledge and means necessary to create gems, which is very interesting. I'm not sure if that's going to come into play at some point, but that was actually a very interesting thing to learn. And they learn that vegetables don't work like gems. They don't grow out of the ground walking and talking and having feelings and singing and crying and stuff like that. Steven tells them this, and they're pretty bummed about it and kind of just want to end the whole thing. They literally built an entire farm just to make some gems out of the ground, or I guess vegetables that would be gem-like out of the ground, and they just decided to give up once they learned that that's not how vegetables work. But Steven ended up trying to help them by making a pumpkin. As we know, Steven can turn vegetables and fruits and such into living things, so he licks a pumpkin seed, puts it in the ground, and it becomes a pumpkin dog. Now again, as I mentioned before, we're not sure how Steven this power works exactly, because when he was making watermelons, most of them were just versions of him, and then when we go to Super Watermelon Island, there is actually a watermelon dog, and we do see like an old ancient wise wizard type watermelon person. So we're not sure how this power works. We don't know if it's a conscious decision for him to make a specific type of form for the vegetable or fruit. We don't know if it's just random, or we don't know if he can control it, but he just doesn't know how to yet, because it's not a power he's really focused on. So we're not sure, but regardless, it came out as a pumpkin dog, and the pumpkin dog was loyal to Steven and went right to Steven because Steven, of course, created it. And then Steven creates a weird and unusual murder on a pumpkin in front of the pumpkin dog, because he wants to show Lapis and Peridot how to make a face on a pumpkin. So he basically carves the pumpkin, carves out the eyes, the mouth, and basically spills out its brains and guts in front of the pumpkin dog. And with that context, carving pumpkins is it's pretty gruesome. Pretty gruesome activity. So the dog is freaked out and goes to Lapis and Peridot's arms. And Steven says, oh, it's nice to have addition to the family. And right as he says that, a plane flies overhead, and we get to meet a new character. But before I get to that, I'm curious to see if this dog is actually going to stick around and be a main part of the show, potentially. I guess we'll see. But anyway, so as he says that, we see a plane fly overhead, and it's a guy who's pissed off for some reason about the barn and the way it looks. It looks like a mess. What's going on? So Lapis, Peridot, and Steven show up, and Lapis and Peridot are like, who is this man attacking our home / us, at least verbally? So Lapis grabs her with water, and this strange man exclaims that it's his barn, and Steven is very confused. So Greg, Pearl, Amethyst, and Garnet, they show up to see what's going on, and it turns out Greg knows this man, and he's actually Greg's cousin named Andy, and this is the first time we actually see some of Greg's family. Now, I think Andy is actually voiced by the same person who voiced Carl in Aqua Teen Hunger Force, if you're familiar with that show. I'm not actually sure if this is the case or not, but he sounded a lot like him. I feel like at the very least the actor was kind of taking that sort of as an influence, that sort of South Jersey, Philly Italian type of vibe going on. But it was very interesting to finally meet one of Greg's relatives, and it looks like the theories were confirmed. A lot of people, I kind of brushed around the idea myself in my last analysis video on Gem Harvest, but a lot of people guessed that this was a relative of Greg's because we knew that the barn was owned by Greg's aunt and uncle, who had a great love for aviation, and there were a lot of plane parts in the barn. That's how Pearl was able to make the rocket in space race and stuff like that. So we knew that this was likely going to be the case. But it's nice to actually see a relative of Greg's family and a relative of Steven's, because I think this is the first relative of Steven's we actually get to meet, and same for him. He's only really known Gems for most of his life, and as he states before, he really wants to get to know the human side of his family. So this is a really cool thing to see. And something pretty crazy that we learn is Greg's last name isn't actually Universe. Greg Universe is not a real last name. It's their family name is actually Greg DeMeo, which is very funny because we know, I'm sure anyone watching this has tried to get people to watch Steven Universe or tell people about Steven Universe, and you kind of explain that that's his name, Steven Universe, first name Steven, last name Universe, and they're like, what kind of last name is that? And it was like, whatever, it's a fictional world, Universe could be a last name, sure, but no, apparently that's not the case. Greg, legally though, he did legally change his name to Universe, but the original last name was Greg DeMeo, which means Steven's name is legally technically Steven Universe, but it should theoretically be Steven DeMeo, which is pretty funny. That was a really cool tidbit to learn. And so, Greg and Steven kind of try to introduce Andy to the gems, and he calls them illegal aliens, and he's just confused about what is going on, and he says at least you should have married an American. Anyway, I think that was clearly for the adults. That was almost definitely for the adults actually. But yeah, Andy's a bit racist. He's just a little racist, but it's fine. We'll work on it. We'll eat some dinner. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be cool. It's gonna be good. And the gems are kind of talking about how they're not sure about Andy and him coming around, because Steven kind of wants them to be a family and get together and stuff. And Amethyst is like, I'm not sure. I don't like how there's just a new Greg showing up out of nowhere. And Pearl says, well, our Greg is vastly superior, clearly superior. And that made me really happy, because we know Pearl and Greg have had kind of a rocky relationship for a while. So it really speaks volumes to how much their relationship has grown over time, and how Pearl has really grown to really love and respect Greg. And we learned that she never really truly hated him before, but she did resent him, and it shows that she's really moved past that and really does like Greg and appreciate him as a person. So that really made me happy to see. But we see, so now they're starting to make dinner or whatever, and they're doing all these gem stuff. So Garnet's basically hitting the ground and making vegetables fly out of the air, and Lapis is catching them in the air and stuff like that, and they're just making all this stuff. But what's interesting is when Garnet punches the ground, some carrots come out and they float, and they just stay in the air for a while. Now this was like a really interesting tidbit. I don't know if this is ever going to be relevant in the future or not, but I noticed that the carrots just kind of stay in the air before Lapis catches them. I don't know if because Garnet had some sort of weird impact in her ground pound, I guess you could say, that made the carrots just stay there, or if Garnet, maybe even Lapis, made them float there with their mind, and is there some type of weird telekinesis thing that we're going to learn about, or is it just a cartoon and the carrots just stayed there because physics don't apply in cartoons? I have absolutely no idea, but that was actually pretty interesting. I'm not sure we're ever going to actually see any more of that type of power again, if that even was a power. But it seems like Andy is taking notice to, Lapis flying in the air and Garnet hitting the ground, and Steven just says, oh yeah, they work out. I think he says something along the lines like, oh yeah, your ants are pretty strong. So it seems like he kind of gets that there's something up with the gems, but he doesn't truly get it, which seems to be kind of a common theme with the common people. Lots using the word common a lot. The common people in Steven Universe, where they're just kind of like, yeah, magic, sure, why not? They don't really question it. They don't really think about it. But we learn that Andy has been traveling around the world and seen a lot of stuff. And what's interesting here, again, this may or may not be a thing, but it's interesting that he doesn't run into any gem-related things at all. I would feel like he would run into a kindergarten or a temple or the strawberry battlefield or something. I'm not sure, and it brings the question, like, how aware is the public of the gems and their existence and their history, because it doesn't seem like they're really that aware of the backstory and what has been going on. This might be a video for another day. I'm not sure if the government is aware. I don't know if this is like a Harry Potter situation where the Muggles kind of interact with the higher ups. The higher up Muggles kind of interact with the higher up gem wizards to kind of keep the balance and make sure, the wizarding world isn't really exposed to the Muggles. I don't know if it's a situation where the government is aware of the gems, but they just kind of keep them under wraps. It doesn't seem like that's the case, because the gems walk around in public all the time, totally free. And, Ronaldo has a blog about it, and, she's going to rock shows and all this stuff. So I don't think that's the case, but I'm curious as to why no one really questions it. I guess they just kind of accept magic as a thing, as Andy seems to do. He's still kind of weird. He's still clearly weirded out by it. So it's like not a normal thing, but he's not as surprised as I feel like he should be, if that makes sense. I feel like if I discovered that there are these magical aliens that existed that can fly and are super powerful, I'd be a little more shocked than he is, than like, oh, well, you're floating on a woman. This is weird, but I'm kind of rambling now. But so they make food. Steven actually uses his shield as a plate, which is pretty funny. And they make the food, they sit down for dinner, and we actually get a funny little Thanksgiving reference. Peridot and Lapis are pretending to be the homeworld gems, and Amethyst and Pearl or whatever, they're pretending to be they are the crystal gems, but they're pretending to be the crystal gems, and Peridot and Lapis are talking about how they're homeworld and they're going to come and just start a colony on this barn, and then Amethyst is like, no, we have corn and we're going to defend it, which is obviously a reference to the Pilgrims and the Native Americans, which is a whole nother discussion in itself, but that was pretty funny. So this is clearly the definitive Thanksgiving episode, just based on that reference, which was kind of a little bit subtle, but still very funny. And the corn thing may or may not have been a reference to Star versus the Forces of Evil and how sacred the corn is to the Mumins. It may just be a coincidence. I have absolutely no idea, but if it was intentional, it'd be a really cool Easter egg. But nothing else really happens in as far as secrets go. We know the Andy storms off because he feels like he's not really part of the family, and he feels hurt that he never really saw the family, and he just kind of, it's a lot of emotions, a lot of feelings. Steven and Lapis chase after him. Lapis convinces him. We see that Andy really does care about Steven, since Steven, almost died. He almost fell off the plane. No big deal. So we see that Andy really does care about Steven and really does miss the family. And it's a very interesting theme of people not wanting things to change, wanting things to stay the same all the time, stay traditional, and people just being stuck in their ways. And Andy was that person where he just wanted, he wanted something traditional. He wanted the traditional celebration, and the gems tried to give him to that, but it was different. It was new. It was new people, and they're talking about new things. And it just didn't really make sense. They didn't even eat food, you know what I mean? So that was really weird, and it was just about him kind of coming to terms with that. And he was reminiscing, about, the family and the family that kind of left. Greg was the first person that left the family, and then other people started leaving over time, and how that just kind of hurt him. And then he realizes he had a plane. He could have been visiting all these people this whole time, but he just didn't. And I think that speaks to, a lot of people who, maybe dealing with certain relatives or just people in general who are very stuck in their ways and want things to stay a certain way and are stuck in tradition. And, things do change. Like, things aren't going to stay the same. I mean, as family, people say blood's thicker than water, but family comes and goes. Family can come, family can go. Friends come and go. Love comes and go. You're going to be moving places. You're going to be in new places, new friends, and things are going to change. People are going to have a different role in your life than they used to, and things do change. And I think that was a pretty great theme and a pretty great way to get that across to a younger viewer. But what was very interesting, kind of going off of that, is we learned that Greg left about 20 years ago. So here's what's interesting that someone brought to my attention. So apparently this could indicate that Steven Universe is taking place in the future. Now, this is a theory, but it does have evidence. I'm not sure if I necessarily buy into it, but this was brought to my attention, so I'm going to mention it. So Andy does, he says that Greg left about 20 years ago in his van or whatever, right? So if we look on Greg's mixer, he actually has a sticker that says Tour 07. Now, of course, this could mean he just happened to go, see a concert that was touring in 2007. Absolutely possible. We know that Greg is still up for shows, even though he's older now. He was about to go to a show with Amethyst, and a very young artist at that. So I don't think that would stop Greg from touring. But what's interesting is that apparently one of Greg's manuals for his van actually said 2000 to 2001. So that would mean Greg would have had the van at the very earliest 2000 to 2001. Nothing super relevant. We might do a video on that, just kind of the lore and the technology of the current world of Steven Universe. But that pretty much covers it for this episode. It was a cool episode, not super story heavy, not super lore heavy, but still a great episode. We learned a lot about Greg and Steven. And it was just cool backstory. And it was a cute, fun episode. So I'm looking forward to 3 Gems and a Baby. Let us know what you thought of this episode, and if you found any other secrets or Easter eggs or anything in the comments down below. Shout out to our patrons as usual. If you want some dope rewards, want to help out the channel, check out our Patreon in the description down below or at the end of the video. Really helps out. And thank you guys so much for watching. I've been Michael Williams. You've been watching Cartoon Universe. We will see you in the next video. Peace.